that he has nothing to hide. Jackson's physician is battling rumors concerning what he did and he did not do in moments before the singer's death. Well, let's bring in our Brian Todd. You've been following this the whole day, and you've got a pretty good sense of why he was hired for the concert and a lot of details. Tell us why.
Yeah, we know you've spoken to one of his attorneys. We've spoken to another. Through those discussions and through records that we've been able to dig up, we're getting new details about Michael Jackson's personal physician, the man who tried to revive him until the very end. Through his attorneys, Dr. Conrad Murray maintains he did nothing wrong in the death of Michael Jackson.
Dr. Murray is not a suspect in the investigation of Michael Jackson's death. He is a witness.
Murray's attorneys tell CNN he did prescribe some medications to Jackson, but they emphatically deny rumors that he gave the star the narcotic painkillers OxyContin or Demerol. Conrad Murray graduated from Meharry Medical College in Nashville 20 years ago. He's known Jackson since 2006. His attorneys say at that time, one of Jackson's kids became ill in Las Vegas, and someone in his security detail recommended Dr. Murray. They say Murray didn't become Jackson's personal physician until early May, when he was hired to be with the star through his upcoming concert series in London. According to the reputable healthcare ratings group Healthgrades, Dr. Murray was not board certified in either of his two specialties, internal medicine or cardiology. His lawyers acknowledge that. We asked experts about board certification.
You're in absolutely no legal trouble for not being board certified unless you misrepresent yourself. It's a great thing to have. It's something to look for, but it's not legally required that you be board certified to practice medicine.
Healthgrades also has no record of any sanctions or malpractice claims filed against Murray in California. The group says records from Texas and Nevada, where he also practiced, are not available. There is evidence of some financial difficulty. Court records show Dr. Murray had at least 2 civil judgments filed against him last year by 2 financial companies, totaling at least $250,000. But of course, none of that reflects on Dr. Murray's actual treatment of Michael Jackson. One of Murray's lawyers told us they don't know anything about his financial situation, but on those civil judgments, one of the attorneys said, quote, "Show me a doctor who's been practicing for 20 years and hasn't gone through something like that, Suzanne." They're maintaining it doesn't have any bearing on his treatment.
And Brian, you have details, new details about why it was that this doctor was hired specifically for the concert series. Can you explain that?
Yes, well, we've talked to officials with the promoter, AEG Live. They say that their original intent for this series was to hire a doctor for Mr. Jackson when they got to London. Michael Jackson insisted, they say, on hiring Dr. Murray. AEG says that they gave Michael Jackson advance money to pay Dr. Murray. They were going to give him that money. They were making those arrangements when Michael Jackson died. One of Murray's lawyers told us that Dr. Murray is owed $300,000 by AEG Live for that deal. An official with AEG Live would not comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian, for following all that. Of course, meanwhile, while many of you want to know what happened during Michael Jackson's final moments, and what did his personal doctor do? Ed Chernoff, thank you so much for joining us here in the Situation Room. We appreciate your time. First question, I want to basically set the scene, if you will. Your client, Dr. Murray, when he first arrived, he discovered Michael Jackson was in distress, that he wasn't breathing, to the time that the 911 call was made. What was your client doing? What was the doctor doing?
Well, he was performing CPR, primarily.
Was he by himself?
He was. He was by himself.
And how long did it take before the 911 call was made?
We are estimating it took about at least 30 minutes before the 911 call was eventually made. There was a slowdown, primarily because there was no phone service in the house, and Dr. Murray did not know precisely the address of the Jackson residence.
Well, why didn't Dr. Murray, from the very beginning, make that initial 911 call when he realized that Jackson was not breathing, that he started CPR? Why didn't he call at that moment?
Well, you're asking why a cardiologist and a doctor would be calling for doctors. His first goal was to resuscitate Michael Jackson. He knows what to do. He knows how to perform CPR. He performed it properly. That was his first. That was his first goal. If he could resuscitate him, and then if he needed further help, then he would call for that.
But let me just understand that Michael Jackson, he was in his bed. He wasn't in a hospital setting. He didn't immediately think that perhaps he should go ahead and ask for some assistance at that time?
No, well, look, no, he's a cardiologist. He knows that if a person is not breathing, he knows what to do. And he did what he needed to do to try to resuscitate Michael Jackson. When he realized in a very short period of time, Suzanne, that he could not resuscitate him, then of course he started looking for ways to get help and by calling 911.
How long did he actually perform CPR on Mr. Jackson before he realized he needed to make a phone call?
Well, it would have been 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but the phone call then was delayed because like I say, there was no phone service. He called security to ask for somebody to come up to help. There was no call. There was no answer when he called. He then ran downstairs at some point, yelled for help, got the chef who was in the kitchen to get security up there. By the time security got up there, then the call was made immediately. This entire time, with the exception of him running downstairs, he was performing CPR on Michael Jackson.
And the doctor didn't have a cell phone? He didn't have his own? So he didn't use his own cell phone to call?
No, of course he did. He used his own cell phone, but he did not have the exact address, Suzanne. And he needed the exact, he knew how to get there, but he did not have the exact address. He was, at the same time he's using his cell phone, he's performing CPR. He's got a pulse, but he's still not breathing on his own. Mr. Jackson is not. And this is all going on at the exact same time. Eventually, security came up and a phone call was made.
And were there any other doctors that were present, or it was just the two of them? Were they alone?
They were alone.
You have said before that Dr. Murray was not aware, or at least he did not administer Demerol or OxyContin to Michael Jackson, that he wasn't aware that he was taking any. Did he know that Michael Jackson had any other doctors, or was he the only doctor?
He didn't know for sure whether he had any other doctors. There was some suspicions that there might be other doctors, but he didn't know for sure.
Why not?
Well, because Michael didn't share it with him, and Michael denied it.
Did he ask him if he had other doctors that were administering these drugs?
You're talking about Demerol and OxyContin?
Yes.
No, of course not. He didn't suspect that he was using these other drugs.
Why didn't he suspect that? There were other people who've come forward who've said that Michael Jackson told them, Deepak Chopra, who actually told us on CNN, that Michael Jackson admitted that he not only asked for prescribed drugs from his friend, but that he also was receiving it from other people. Why didn't Dr. Murray know that or inquire about that?
Well, I saw that interview with Dr. Chopra, and I was very interested in what he had to say about that. But he's talking about a period of time long before Dr. Murray ever got on board to be Michael Jackson's private physician. Dr. Murray has known Michael Jackson since 2006, but he hasn't treated him as a physician until May of 2009 when he was hired by the production company.
But isn't that the kind of information his doctor would want to know, even if he hired him late in the process here, whether or not he had been taking Demerol or OxyContin?
If you're asking, should he have asked, hey, Michael, just wondering, do you take Demerol or OxyContin? He had no reason to suspect that he had. It's not as if it was well known that that was happening, if it was happening, by the way. I mean, let's not rush to judgment here and say that Michael Jackson was a drug addict. We don't know that. But
isn't that part of the problem, is that that is not known? Wouldn't that be a typical traditional question that a doctor who is treating a patient would ask? Are you on prescription medications? Are you taking this, that, or the other?
Yeah.
So he would ask him, correct?
Not this, that, or the other. He would ask him, and I'm sure that he did, you know, are you on any other prescription medication? Are you doing this? Are you doing anything that would interfere with medications I might give you, or that might affect your health? Especially since he was hired to make sure that he was healthy and taken care of for the 50 concert tour that he was going to do in Europe. I'm sure he asked, but Michael Jackson never told him that he was taking any other drugs, certainly not Demerol, certainly not OxyContin, if he was.
So you're saying he has asked, you're confirming that he did ask Michael Jackson
I'm
whether
not.
he was on those drugs?
No, Suzanne, I'm not confirming that. I'm agreeing with you that that's something that you would expect him to have asked. And knowing what I know about Dr. Murray, I'm sure that he did ask him that, or ask him if he's on other drugs. And I think that if Dr. Murray had known that he was using other drugs, then he would have taken that into consideration in many respects.